Welcome everyone to another episode of The Inside Word. My name is Lachlan McLean from Beer Cartel, Australia's #1 craft beer retailer. For our 16th episode, I chat to Johnny, Latta and Kerri Abba, co-founders of Kerrie Beverages and Nomad. In part 1, I talked to Johnny about how a small Italian wine importer has morphed into the leading Australian craft beer importer, with breweries including Stone, Deschutes, Deep Creek, Jester King, Amundsen, Chur and many other world-class breweries. We also talk about the ins and outs of beer importing and the challenges that they face bringing in beer from the other side of the world. Hey Johnny, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I guess before we kind of dig into the Experience It story, I know you've just come back from, I think, the States you're telling me.
That's right, yes.
What were you doing over there?
The States was a bit of a buying trip, or a research trip. So Deschutes had their distributors conference, so we took the opportunity to go over there and then spend 2 weeks exploring and visiting our current brewers, finding new brewers, tasting lots of beer.
Yeah, lovely. I think we will dig into maybe some of that later, but definitely some hopefully new brands we might see on the future.
Indeed.
I guess Experience It, you're an importer.
Right.
We'll talk about Nomad, I guess, later in the second half of this podcast. But how did it all kind of come to be?
By chance, actually. So I've always been a craft beer drinker since I was 18, legally able to drink, with Redback when it was independent being my go-to craft beer. So ever since I've been drinking, it's always been craft for a long time now. So we were lucky enough in my previous role in my corporate life, we moved over to Europe, to Italy, and it just so happened we were smack dab in the middle of the craft beer heartland of Italy, which we had no idea at the time.
Yeah, right. Where was that?
A little place in the Piemonte, a place called Barolo. So we
fantastic wines.
for wine.
Yes.
So we love wine, which is why we were there. But at the same time, we realised that Birra Balladin, which is one of the godfathers of Italian craft beer, was literally 5 minutes down the road.
Wow.
And this journey of beer and wine started. And the job I was doing at the time, which was consulting, had a bit of downtime there as well. And, obviously my family came over with me, so Kerri and the kids. And when I was travelling, Kerri had a lot of spare time because she couldn't do her regular job that she used to do in Australia. Yep. So she'd start going to wineries and checking things out. And we got the idea a few years down after being there. So, all this great wine, why don't we send this great wine back to Australia? And, we had all these friends who love wine as well.
Yep.
So we just started initially bringing back wine. And I one night said, wow, what about the beer? There's all this awesome beer that no one in Australia knows about. Everyone knew about Moretti and Peroni, people call that craft. Well, it's not craft, that's commercial. So we said, we're getting these containers going back for our friends. Why don't we actually do some beer?
Yeah, right.
So I'd been going to some beer festivals in Italy and found some brewers. So Brewfist was the first one. And Birra del Borgo was the second one. So we thought, let's try that. And literally went from there.
How were they received in Australia? Because this would have been, nearly 10 years ago now.
It was indeed. It was good. So at the time, we never thought it was going to be a thing. It was just actually a love for craft beer, love for wines. Let's just share it back in Australia with a few people. Right. So my job, I did a lot of consulting on sales and category management over the years. So I sat down one night, all the family went to bed, and I looked up the web and found all these venues like the Wheatie in Adelaide and the Tap House in Melbourne and Sydney, and I just rang them and said, listen, I've got some Italian craft beer, are you keen? The Tap House said, we'll do a full tap takeover of Italian beers, and so we did a first container, and I thought, well, that's great, this is good. But at the time we called ourselves Birra Italiana, Italian beer, which is in Italian, thinking, well, it's a one-off thing, why don't we just cut a name like that? And so we did that, and then that went into a container every sort of 8 weeks, and then I said, hang on, more people want this beer. So we did more and more beer. I found more and more Italian brewers. So for the first couple of years, we were literally all Italian beers. We had 8 or 9, I'd still say the best Italian craft brewers. And that was great. People accepted that, but they accepted that at the time because there wasn't a lot of craft beer coming in from overseas except from the US. So obviously Sierra Nevada and which were Phoenix were doing. And so introducing something from Europe like this was pretty cool because even the UK brewers who at the time weren't really coming over for craft beer. You had a lot of the traditional real ale brewers, but not a lot of the craft brewers. So this was quite new and interesting.
Was there, that's about 10 years ago in Italy, was the Italian craft beer market back then, everyone thinks of Germany and in Belgium, versus, I guess, say America. Where was Italy aligned in that? Was that kind of producing IPAs or hop focused, or was it kind of more doing farmhousey Belgium kind of, that? Where was that kind of going in Italy?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think Italian styles are really different. I mean, you look at Italian beers, you go to Italy and you spend a bit of time there, you realise their styles aren't really... They probably follow a lot of Belgian trends and sort of German trends as well. They're doing more and more IPAs now, but if you look at the brewers like Beer Blood Inn and you try their beers, it's hard to peg them to a style and actually match them to other brewers because they are so unique to what Italians do. And one of the things I think you think about Italians, and even like not just the Italians, the French, the Italians, the Spanish are pretty similar in that they've grown up with alcohol.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, we live in a nanny state here where everything's all evil and bad, where you go to Italy and the kids are introduced to alcohol when they're young. Yeah. So as they grow up, everything, their culture is about how do you combine food with wine, with beer, with everything else. And so when they brew beers, they're not trying to destroy your palate and kick you in the head with hops. They're trying to give you a balanced beer that goes really well with food that you can just down and enjoy over a really lovely,
I guess it's definitely more, on the table with dinner or with some food in the afternoon.
Absolutely. I mean, a funny story just linked to that too. So one of the jobs I used to do in Europe, I used to consult to Disney all around the world, and I'd spent a few years going to every office around the world, and meeting all their key teams. And we went to Italy, and Disney's got a very strict rule of no alcohol at all in their business. Went to Italy, and the first time I went to, hadn't been to Spain yet either, but I went to Italy and sat down, and lunchtime came, and the lunch starts to come in, and the wines gets put on the table. And it's like I looked around at my host, who was an American guy. I said, "Hang on, I thought alcohol was barred in Disney." So yeah, but we're in Italy. Of course you have wine here. So I was like, okay, fair enough. So it just goes their culture, the way they approach alcohol. And I think actually people can learn from that as well, the way they approach alcohol.
So you were importing, Italian wine and Italian beer for a number of years. Then you kind of started to look outside of just Italy? Yeah,
so I think as we got more and more interest in what we were doing, we started to look around. Part of my previous job was category management. So I was looking at, actually, and I was looking further in the future, saying, I love craft beer, and what do I want to do after consulting ends? Or consulting, one of those things that it's great while it lasts, but then you get these periods where, now what do I do? So I think for the family's point of view and having a long-term business for our family that we could be proud of and actually do something we loved, it's like, hang on, we love wine, love beer. Maybe while I'm consulting, let's try to build this out a bit and make it actually a bit more of a business long-term for us. So I thought, okay, and I read a stat at the time that the Italian craft beer market was the third largest in the world behind.
Oh, really?
It was the US, UK, and Italy, and this is going back 8 or 9 years ago. The stats came from obviously somewhere. And I thought, okay, well, if this is working, how about all these great UK beers? And Kerri's family is from the UK, so we used to spend a lot of time there, so we used to try a lot of their beers. And I looked at, then I started researching what's in Australia, who's here, why are they here? And then I said, okay, look, probably the US is a good market to approach, the UK are the markets. So I think then after Italy, I got my first, it was UK Brewers. And I remember I was chasing Magic Rock at the time, who unfortunately now is not independent. So I remember I was hassling them on the emails and phones. And I read on a craft beer site that are going to be in Spain, in Madrid at the craft beer festival in the Bullring in Madrid. So I literally flew down and I harassed Richard at his stand and said, I'm Johnny from Experience in Australia, or at the time Birra Italiana, and convinced him in Madrid to give me some of his beers.
Yeah, right.
So I went from that, and then as over then time we got introduced to more and more. So the business then evolved from, our Italian portfolio is now tiny because Italian beers are a little bit harder now to sell. But bulk of our portfolio is UK, US, New Zealand, and Scandinavia. Because then when we got introduced to Scandinavian brewers, that was the new, wow, hang on a second, this is amazing, what do we do here?
So back then you had Magic Rock. We had... Who else was kind of, who was the first American brewery?
First American brewer was, it was 6 Point at the time.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a bit of a long backstory to that one, but 6 Point we had, and I know there was someone else now. And we've only ever lost one brewer, which unfortunately was them. So 6 Point was one, and then we picked up Clown Shoes, because I actually flew over to see 6 Point, and I had my little going through Rate Beer, who's the other cool brewers, right? Let's go and drive and see them. Clown Shoes, great, tick. So we had those two, and then got Victory. So they were our three portfolios. And then Stone was my big target. It was like, right. And I just hassle. And that went a bit, that was, obviously we ended up getting it, but there was a few little hiccups along the road, which one of them was a very bad hiccup, but...
yeah, I remember... But I remember when I was still in Brisbane, and I think the first beer that you guys... Was it the Enjoy Buy?
Yeah,
you bought one single shipment. I think it was air-shipped over...
No, we did before that. So with Stone, actually, literally I had friends. So we ended up being good friends with Sam from Dogfish Head and with the guys from Victory, and they were doing collabs with Greg. So I ended up sort of with Stone. So I sort of got to know them. And what I used to do is look at who was being grey marketed. And there's a few obviously grey market importers in the country, which we're very anti that as a importer. So I was looking who was being grey marketed and who are the brands that I think are the really strong brands that people want to drink. Stone was one of those. So I used to email Greg or his player every second month saying, I can get your beer. And it's like, do you want to do it properly or do you want to do it grey market because it's here? Yeah. And eventually the sales manager at the time said, look, come and have a chat and we'll talk about it. And they agreed, but they forgot to tell Greg. And this is the pear-shaped part, was they forgot to tell Greg, and we planned our orders, planned everything out, had everything organised, and we put out things on Facebook, it's coming, we've got this stuff, and then someone just by chance did a reply post and then CC or at hashtagged, Greg, and Greg's replied back, what? There's no way I'm sending beer to Australia. And it's like, well, hang on. Hang on.
So they are lost in translation communication.
It is. So I rang the VP of sales and said, did you see that tweet? He goes, no. And oops. Okay. So a long story, but then 6 months, then we worked it out over the next 6 months and finally ended up getting it and proved that we could do it properly. And since then, I think we're now their second biggest export market. So.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I guess for breweries like Stone, Australia probably had a pretty bad reputation of importing grey market. I remember back then that was probably 2013, 14 kind of in.
Yeah, unfortunately there's a couple, and there's still a lot of it. And there's a couple of brands I love, and I know them personally, and they're still here, and I keep saying, guys, they're here. Let's do this properly because it's killing the beer.
Exactly. I think when you don't know how it gets here, how long it's got here, where it's come. Often it's never come direct. When Stone first came into the country, I remember, and it was always just fantastic. But I guess it's a good segue into talking about the actual importation process.
Sure.
When you got a brewery in Australia, you just make the beer, set it out, just deliver it, whatever. When you're importing beers, say talk about Stone, I guess is one of the bigger ones. Do you go to them and say, we want this amount of beer, and they brought it for you, or do you kind of get a list and say, this is what we've got? What do you want?
I think it depends on scale. So if I look at the American brewers, because export's tiny for them. Yeah. As a distributor, we might be big for our European guys, but when it comes to US, we don't order anywhere even as much as one of their individual states because there's so many more people there. So when it comes to US brewers, we tend to fit into their planning cycle. So they'll say they're brewing these, they're available on this date. We organise our pickups the day after. Yeah. So Stone's a good example where I have to place my order by a set date, and then I have a pickup date because that's when it's being packed. So they pack it, label it, and it's out the door. So it's time. So the beer is fresh. We're picking it up fresh. The only beers we might delay that is for as dark beers, which can time. Yep. But literally, all those US brewers, they set my pickup cycle because they want their beer out the door as soon as it's packaged. So when people talk about imported beer, and what's not, it's actually American brewers are anal about right. It's available on the 25th, and we want to truck it on the 26th, and it's being loaded. Sweet, that's done. It's perfect. So that's that process with the brewers, US brewers, is they're our biggest volume beers because they're also the cheapest because American scale means they can brew beers cheaper than anyone else in the world. So we tend to fit in there. When it comes to the European cycle, that's really up to us. So most of those guys are tiny. Some of them are bigger. A lot of them are bigger than Australian brewers, but they're scale-wise and their export they do, particularly Scandinavians. We might get allocated 20 cases. It's like, okay, 20. And what else can we put on that pallet? So we go through what they've got available now, what they're brewing, and we'll plan our shipment cycles around. Okay, you got this available on the 25th. Let's pick it up, a day or two later because you've got another beer available. Right? Let's load it up. So with the US brewers, where we might do pallets, where the European brewers are doing 20 of that, 10 of that, 5 of that, because that's all they can give us because they're so maxed out with everything else they do. Which to me is actually the more exciting part of it because they get all these cool, interesting beers that are very different to what Australian brewers are brewing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess there's, you look all around, and we always talk about, Belgium's obviously known for this, but then, every kind of place has got their own identity, and that's kind of the exciting part. And I guess Australia is still relatively new in its craft beer journey, and I guess we might be getting there, but we haven't necessarily got our identity yet.
Yep.
So bringing in obviously all these breweries is kind of exciting to see kind of where we will go and kind of go from there. But I guess another thing, you're traveling all around the world, seeing all these great breweries. What's the trends that you've kind of been picking up on? Like, did you see the New England IPA and the haze craze over there before it hit here?
Absolutely.
What are we seeing at the moment?
Well, I think, and I've been saying this for a while as well, because the way I think I always look at things the way I personally do things, because I'm not unique. I think I'm pretty much a normal drinker. I wouldn't call myself a beer geek. I love craft beer, but I'm I know what I like. And I think if you look overseas, and Australia's not there yet, but if you look in the US, what surprised me my last trip was I'd go to Deschutes and it'd all be IPAs originally. And Portland, same thing, all IPAs. This time, literally every single brewer walks through the door. Half their lineup was lagers or sours or sessionable, Berliners or Gozers. So you had this fairly big shift away from just those big IPAs to more 4% sessionables. They're doing these things called hard beverages now, which are brewed. They're technically beers, but they're more designed for lifestyle, because they're finding drinkers are getting really fatigued by massive 6%, 7% IPAs.
Yeah, right.
And they don't want to sit there and drink them all night. So there's a trend, it's happening in Europe as well, because you can see the European brewers all doing the same sorts of concepts now, where younger drinkers coming through saying, I don't want big multi IPAs and I don't want to get smashed. I want to have something fruity, something interesting flavour that's light, that's low cal.
Yeah.
So everyone's got this.
That's, I guess, my conversation, these podcasts with other breweries. I know, obviously, the retail and the consumer side is still on the big IPA bandwagon, but in my chats with brewers and stuff, Pilsner.
Oh.
It is what every brewer that I've spoken to is, I'm like, what are they drinking? Pilsner.
Yeah.
And I guess that just echoes that sentiment where I guess maybe the American breweries are starting to put them on and being a bit received. And I totally, we were asked only a couple of days ago, what do we think are going to happen over the next 12, 24 months? And we said, session ales, lagers, session craft lagers, warm-made lagers will start coming back.
So I think the perception of lager, the funny thing is, and I've keep saying, is every time you go to a festival, the number one, we put a lager on, that's the number one selling beer at the festival. So hang on, why am I selling 5 times as much of that keg versus the IPA? Goza. So Freshie Salt and Pepper is one of Nomad's original core beers. It's a classic traditional Goza. And at a festival, it outsells any other beer on tap 2-1. And the lager, same thing. But then translate that to retail, people, I don't want a Goza or a lager. Hang on. Everyone's drinking it there, but you're not going to drink it at home. It's a weird dynamic right now of how that all works. But I think it definitely will change. And I know myself, if I sit at home having a barbecue, I'll have one IPA, or I share 2 with a mate, and then I'll go back through some lagers, some Helles, some all these lower but interesting beers. And there's a couple of Australian brewers doing some really great lagers right now, and a lot of the Europeans, they're lagering as their thing. So there's some amazing lagers coming out right now, which the unfortunate thing is Australian drinkers, or the pointy end of Australian drinkers, aren't really keen on them right now, or aren't interested to try them. But when you do, it's, oh, wow, this is fantastic.
I guess in the importating process, we talked about what's trending and all this sort of stuff, and how do you actually get the beers out here? Like you said before, you were in America. Bringing in the new breweries. But what is the process? You've kind of got your hit list, I guess, of who do you want to go to, but how do you kind of then convince them to actually send beer the other side of the world? Yeah,
every week I speak to brewers about this, and new brewers and existing brewers. I think it's not easy, and it goes pear-shaped sometimes, like it does anywhere. So, the process for us is obviously buying, selecting which beers we want, making sure we've got then our carriers, our logistics companies ready to pick the beer up, containers ready to leave and packed on time. So we're literally setting down to the day saying, right, that beer's going to land at the consolidation or at the port by that date. It's going to be on that boat. It's going to land by that day. Right. So that's our release cycle. That's how fresh it's going to be. But then you get things like snowstorms in Europe, which delay a train for a week, and that delays the entire container for a week, or a port strike, or Brexit is just making things a complete nightmare to get beers across the channel. But the other thing we did, living in Europe, was quite good initially for us, because we I used to travel pretty much every day to a different country in Europe as part of my work, and so I'd go and visit brewers in the downtime. And I realised, okay, well, out of the UK it takes 48 days. I'm not going to give away secrets away here too. So 48 days from UK, and I thought, well, that's a long time to put beer in the water, and that's what the UK brewers are saying. So I spent a long time going, right, there's got to be a quicker way out of Europe, and we found it. It only takes me 24 days now. I'm not telling how, but none of it goes out of the UK anymore. So we basically worked out a process. I used to manage myself where every single beer out of Europe, whether it's from Scandinavia, anywhere else, goes out of a different port. That takes me 24 days, and I've got trucks from different companies, and the brewers helping me pick it up, collect it, deliver it. Fortunately, with Europe, it's a one union, so I can actually get it without customs checks and stuff. And then in Australia in 24 days, or 28 at the worst. So that was a process we saved, close to a month off from the UK beer shipment. So it only takes me 3 days to get it from UK to where I'm going, and then on a boat. US is a lot easier because that's only 22 to 23 days. New Zealand's only 8 days. So you're talking beer that we do it properly, where we pick it up at the right time. We've lost maybe 30 days by the time it's on a shelf. And when you're talking about a lot of the brewers who are conditioning their beers, particularly Europeans, that's actually a good thing for the beer. So when people look at dates, go, oh, it's a month old. Well, hang on, it's been conditioned. Yeah. It's probably going to hit its mark right now because it's a conditioned beer. So and then you get the issues with export, and we get caught out occasionally where everyone uses different date codes. So the Brits might use 3 months on some really hoppy beers, 6 months on others, some 12 months. Yeah. It's like, oh my God, what do you? And there's no rhyme or some of it's because we think it should be 3. No one's got the rhyme or reason why it's 3 months or 6 months. Everyone's got a theory, but no one's actually got it's got to be that 3 months.
Yeah, I know. Not naming any breweries. It's not even one of your breweries actually, but we had this drama where there was a brewery that used Australian dated stuff for some of their beers, and then US dated stuff for other stuff for their beers, and we're just like, how do we know what's what? And especially from a consumer point, luckily being in the industry, I can ring you up and just be like, what is it? Consumers can't do that.
No, and I think that's a big part of the problem we've got, and I see it obviously on Facebook, and I've had some vocal discussions with some people about this, but I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about certain beers and what you can do with beers, whether it be aging beers, whether it be conditioned beers versus forced carbonation beers. Not every beer has to be drunk fresh.
I think another thing is no one really outside of you guys, I could find that information out, but no one knows how the beer's travelled either. So some are on hot containers, hot trucks here, some are cold stored the entire way.
Absolutely.
There's so many factors that go into it, and I think being in Australia as well, you've got the ideal world of what we wish it could be. But we don't live in an ideal world. So you do your best you can, but at the end of the day, I think we've been having beers for how long now? I've seen comments of it's 2 weeks, maybe it's getting past its. And it drives us up on the wall. And
one of the stories. When I used to go to the US, I used to always bring beers back, and I remember having 6 Points resin, which is an amazing beer.
That's delicious. And
I actually had one in my fridge which was over 12 months old, and I didn't even realise, and I cracked it. It's still that's bloody good.
It's been in the fridge, cold stored.
But it's not. It's obviously past what the Best Buy day. My point on that was, I tasted them. This is damn good. It's drinkable. It's still had this lovely, actually more malty, so it's still a great tasting beer. But drinking it fresh, I knew what it was going to be fresh. But it's one of those things. Fresh, great, different beer. Actually, I'm not going to say drink it 12 months old, but just when I did drink, it's actually this is pretty cool. Tastes good.
Yeah.
So the beers some beers evolve badly, some beers evolve really well. So, and I think, obviously in the day of wasting things, the whole war on waste and everything, we don't want to just throw things out because they're 3 months old. Do they still taste good? Yeah, we'll drink it. It's still good. But as an importer, our whole focus is, we're aiming to turn our beer every 4 weeks. That's my bit of a rule.
That is 100% what we do as well here. We look at what's our month sales, and we want it 1 month is what we go for.
Yeah, and look, if I don't, that's when I start trying to getting it out quickly and cutting our margins and getting it out. Not because it's a bad beer, because I don't want it to be longer than 4. So, unfortunately, it doesn't always go to plan, and sometimes things take longer to sell. Sometimes, things just go wrong. But the biggest challenge we have as an importer is, and I think route to market for anyone, whether it be a local brewer or an importer, is a really hard thing. There is no such thing, and I have looked every single year. I do an RFP out to every logistics company I can find, saying I want an end-to-end. There's no break in my chain. haven't found it yet. And I've spoken to every... And look, you can find it if you do small pockets, but when you're trying to do something nationally or import, there is breaks because Australia's such a big country and because things are so spread out, there isn't this one continuous process you can just rely on all the time.
Yeah, right.
So you end up having to try to piece things together in like a jigsaw puzzle. Whereas you go to the US, you've got companies like Echo who are cold truck from door to door nationally. So, we've got challenges here just because of our size of our country, our population, our spread, everything else. We've also been a little bit anti-air freight as well because I don't think it's the right thing to do. We have done it. So we try to focus more on every container, beer being fresh, landing in 20 days and not charging consumers a massive fortune for stuffing that, you've saved 10 days on the date code. Well, is it worth it?
The how many thousands of dollars? And
so we do it occasionally, but our whole focus is trying to get the best and quickest supply via containers and making sure the brewers all align to us, get their beer days old, not weeks old or months old.
Have you got, I was writing down a list of breweries that you've currently got, Stone, Deschutes, Alesmith, Deep Creek, Chur, Munson. I know you've got Ale Farm coming in, Buxton, Jester King, Prairie.
About 40 breweries.
That's just a small selection.
Yep.
Is there anyone that you wish you could get that you currently don't have? Who's the number one?
Oh, look, it's one because it's classified him as a friend. That's Dogfish Head.
Yeah.
So we spent a lot of time at Dogfish. I spent a lot of time with Sam, hanging out with him and his family. With Brooks, our brewer at Nomad, was trained by Sam. He worked at Sam's Brew Pub in New York. So we've got this affinity. And story also I get involved in this is, and it sort of goes back to our name as well. So we first were called Birra Italiana. We at the time in between I was doing beer and then we're doing wine and we're also running a cycling company because I used to race cycles in bicycles in Italy, and we were running a cycle tour company in my spare time, which I had little of, but we did it, and it was called Experience It. Experience IT because Italy, IT, and there's a capital IT. Yeah, and if you look at our logo, it's got the little Italian colours on the I, which is still there. So as we moved through Birra Italiana, I realised actually it's probably not a good name when we're selling more American beer. So let's just use Experience It because you're experiencing flavours, experiencing beers. So we moved to Experience It. But at that time when I was riding bikes during winter, it's snowing outside. So I had my wind trainer, I had the TV in front of me and I'd be riding and Discovery Channel was on one day and the Discovery Channel Brewmasters with Sam, where they ran 5 episodes and they had to cancel it because Sad Miller had an issue with it.
Yeah.
And I remember watching this thing, oh wow, this is cool, who's this guy? And then I went online, I ordered his book, and this is before I thought it was going to be a business, I thought, so literally we did a few and saw Sam and was like, wow, this guy's cool. And his beers sound cool. And then I went on to Amazon he's got a book. All right, and I bought the book, bring up a business, read the book. I actually give it to all my staff. Most of my new staff from the past, I've given the book to him. So this is why I got into beer. And the way he described it was exactly the way I felt. I was like, this is great. He had this passion for beer. And I thought, right, that's good. And then I found out actually he was friends with another one of our brewers and you're friends with one of our partners. Hang on a second, I'm going to go to New York. I want to go and hang out with him.
Yeah.
So then it just evolved to that. So long story short to say, that is probably the number one brand I want to get because I just have this affinity to why I got into what I'm doing is because I loved it, but I read that book and saw that show and went, man, I don't want to be a corporate whatever for the next 20 years. I want to do something that I'm passionate about. Yeah. That my family can be involved, we can travel, we can meet people. And that's that to that point too, is part of why we do this as well. A lot of importers, I think, it's just about buying and selling beer, which obviously we're trying to make money. But the thing we all love about this is the people we meet along the way because we make a point. And one of the reasons why I was in the US is so I can go and visit all of our brewers. So I literally went from Portland to Detroit to Atlanta to Austin, back to LA, back to Detroit. Because I just wanted to meet our brewers again who we're importing and say just sit down and have a beer with them and just get to know them and chat and just be friends more than I'm trying to get your beer. Because I think that's actually part of the beauty of what craft beer is. It's this global movement where everyone's connected, we're all friends and collaborate and so on.
And I guess, back in the day or, many years ago when that was kind of going on, Sam of Dogfish Head obviously just did not have beer. The second podcast we did on this was talking about the merger with Dogfish Head.
Yes.
What's happened, I guess, now? And has that meant there's any more beer that it might come over? Or
I don't think so. I was texting him the other day because I was going over there trying to catch up. But, I think, they're so popular as well. And there's other reasons why they merge, but that's, I think that one day maybe. I think a lot of US brewers are looking to export because obviously it's getting harder in their local markets, particularly for the big guys. But I think if you look at beers like what they do, they are so different. A lot of the brewers are looking to export are fairly IPA-centric, and it's becoming harder for them, even though they're still massive and they're still growing. It's, how do we get more volume? So whereas Dogfish has never really been that. They've got such a diverse range of beers that there's no one style there particularly. I mean, they've got 90-minute IPA and stuff, which everyone, but they've got so many styles.
They're still one of the, I guess, how do I call them? Original kind of craft beer breweries in America that still have, even in the high-end craft beer nerd market of when 120-minute IPA comes out, everyone just flocks to it.
Yes.
They still have been able to, one of the few breweries, I guess, that have still been able to maintain relevancy.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I guess before we kind of wrap up the EI part, we talked about Pilsners, but I guess what else can we see for EI in the future?
I'm really pushing probably down that track a lot more. So with the sour styles, so more the Gozers and the Berliner Weisses and the Lagers, where I think it's going. Also sort of lifestyle-based drinks, which are linked to brewers. A lot of the brewers we work with now are looking at more of those lifestyle drinks. And when we say lifestyle, it's more the healthier option, so under 100 calories and gluten-free or gluten-reduced stuff, because people are becoming more conscious. And where I'm active, we have ordered some already. We are bringing some of those in already. They've had mixed success, but when I try them, they're great. It's just a matter of getting people to try them. But if I look at what I've seen now with the brewers in the next 6 to 12 months, there's going to be a lot more focus on things that people can actually enjoy without blowing their taste buds off, and actually have a good meal, but actually have something really interesting flavour-wise.
Yeah, I think on that, I guess beer and food, I remember some of the master classes and education courses I've done. I always say to people, because I came from wine before beer as well, and it was always one of my dreams is to be in a bottle shop and have customers come in and like they're doing wine, where they go, I'm having this for dinner tonight, so therefore I must have this wine. Yeah. I'd love to see that in beer, where what you're buying is kind of related to food. So I'm having this for dinner. Oh, cool, got to get this style. I'm like, it's always one of my dreams is to kind of have that kind of happen, and I think it will possibly happen. But those Germany, Belgium, all those countries, they've been doing it for hundreds of years.
I think you'll see more of Wildflower's done an amazing job at it.
Yep.
I think you'll see more of those premiums. And we bring in obviously the brands like the Brewery and Jolly Pumpkin, which are that premium end, very diverse barrel aging styles, which they are wine. They're not a beer.
Absolutely.
And one of the things we have seen locally, we've got a bottle shop out at the bush, and he just rings and says, "Give me the craziest stuff you can give me. Don't just bring it," because he's in a wine region. He just puts a mailer out to all the winemakers, and they come and buy it all because that's what they love.
Yeah, right.
And that's at a very niche market. But I think the more of those, and the more things like Wildflower you start to see as well, you'll start to get people experiencing beer in a different way and actually thinking about it not just as wine. Yeah. The challenge I think for all of us now is getting restaurateurs to actually change 100%. Their mind, because I'm still amazed you can walk into a chef-hatted restaurant and they've got a horrible beer list of all commercial lagers, and it's like, guys, you've got amazing wine list, you've got amazing food, but your beer list is horrendous. And that's pretty much, I'd say, majority of restaurants are still in their headspace is, it's cheap, I can get it from whoever for nothing. Yeah. But I'm a drinker. I will drink. Nobody cares. But I'm a normal person. I'm not unique. I'll walk in, if there's nothing great on that list, I'm going to go, stuff it.
I remember a couple of stories from the wine shop I used to work up in Brisbane, and you'd get the wine people coming in looking. That's dropped tens of thousands of dollars on 6 bottles, and then I need some beer. Can I grab a case of Peroni? Driving out the wall.
It's just, so what? Yeah, so I think that's the challenge, and that's what I think is going over the next couple of 12 months. Yeah, awesome. But it's, imports won't die. I mean, I think the imports as a market, we've grown every year since we've started, and I think that what we're seeing is as more people get into craft, it's like wine, and you're a wine drinker, we're wine drinkers. You'll buy 80% of the time you buy your local wine, and every time that you might see an Italian red and go, that sounds pretty cool. Yep. I'm going to try that. And that's that exploration. People want to see and try things. What are the Scandies doing differently to the Australians?
100%.
Okay, I think it's premium, but it's worth it for one or two beers.
I know from our point here at Beer Cartel, like for us, for our importing and our international, obviously our Australian selection compared to what it was, say, 4 or 5 years ago, even 2-3 years ago, is much more Australian-centric. And I know from our ordering point, we don't tend to order Australian equivalents of international beers. We want something that's different. There's no point having a beer that you can buy down the road coming from the other side of the world that's kind of the same. You want difference. So, and that's kind of, I think, for internationals where it always will be the market, because Australia will make its own identity. You want the other identities as well.
Absolutely.
So yeah, but it's been great talking about where Experience It came from. We'll wrap the experience part up and we'll have a chat about Nomad.
Fantastic.
If you are looking for any of the Experience It beers, including Stone, Deschutes, Deep Creek, or any of the other amazing beers that they bring in, please check out our website at www.beercartel.com.au. In part 2 of this podcast, I talked to both Kerri and Johnny about the creation of Nomad and how the use of the Australian botanicals have helped them become a truly unique Australian brewery. Alrighty, so we've got now Kerri with us to have a chat about Nomad as well. We talked before about how, I guess, Experience Italiana kind of came to be. Mm-hmm. How did Nomad come from all that?
Yeah, so with EI, we were probably about in our 5th year doing a lot of importing, and probably from our perspective, our beer tastes had grown and developed. I actually wasn't a big beer drinker going over to Europe, very much a wine drinker, which is why we settled where we did in Italy. Pretty much never touched a beer because I thought that all beer was, this boring, horrible stuff.
Yep.
And then discovered all these different amazing styles. And so with that, and after visiting all these different breweries, we actually started the thought of, it'd actually be nice to, instead of just importing it, actually start making it. So we had, some really good relationships with different brewers, especially some in Italy. And that was when the talk of, okay, well, my experience had been that I came to Europe and my world just, my eyes just opened to these amazing different styles. What I'd like to do is take that experience back to Australia in a brewing sense and actually come back and bring a lot of different styles back to Australia, and not just to appeal to the average beer drinker, but to actually, to actually show that even though you probably say you don't like beer, I'm sure I can probably find you a style that you do.
Yeah, I think there's so many people that come into the place that work with beer cartels. I don't drink beer, especially partners and tag-alongs. So I don't drink beer. I'm like, what have you had that you don't like? Generally, it's pale lager.
Yeah.
And it's like, I guarantee you there's something.
Or a really hoppy beer,
Either way,
it's a really hoppy beer, and people, a lot of people come in and say, I actually don't like, I don't like beer, and it's, what is it? I just don't like the bitterness. Okay, rightio. Well, let's have a little think about that and, try this. So, yeah, it was really based on our experiences and just wanting to be a producer, I think. It's just that living in Europe and you're just around producers all the time. Everyone's making stuff and, so it was just sort of like, I want to really, put our name to something, put this and so that was where the idea came from with Nomad.
And you mentioned, back in the EI part that with Brooks, who's your head brewer at Nomad, relationship with Beer of the Borgo and Leonardo, how'd that all come to be?
At a cheese festival. So, So as with everything in Italy, it's usually food-centric. So you go to a cheese festival and, of course, there's 20 beer producers there. Because it's, as we were talking about with EI, beer is not ever the singular thing. Beer is always beer, wine, whatever is always food-centric. So at the cheese festival, 20 beer producers and, went around, tried some different beer, and we just started importing the Italian wines. So I got chatting to these different beer producers, and that's when we started importing the different Italian beers. And we just had just the way that we thought about beer and what we wanted to do in Australia. We had this vision of both wanting to bring these different styles to Australia, and so that's when we got chatting about, okay, well, maybe we can look to open a brewery in Australia.
And that was 2014
that we started thinking about it, 15 that we actually started production. So obviously it doesn't happen overnight.
No.
So that was a big process. And, we had a lot of the distribution know-how. We obviously knew a lot about beer. We didn't know how to make it. So very much guided by our Italian partners in that, and they were very precise about what they wanted their brew kit to look like. So basically we filled 6 containers full of the best Italian brew kit, and we built the brewery ourselves. So Italians are good at putting shit together. And so instead of, having lots of trades, we actually brought 3 engineers over from Italy, brought the kit over, put the kit together and built it in an old carpet factory. And that was Nomad. So
on the northern beaches?
On the northern beaches, yeah, which is 5 minutes walk from home, which is always good.
You mentioned, Nomad. Where'd the name come from?
We were nomads of the beer world. So we were basically, we started Nomad when we were living in Italy. We were still 100% of the time in Italy. Our Italian partners also had bars in Paris and New York. So they were travelling the world. Johnny was still doing his consulting, so he was travelling around the world. So we were basically always on planes. We were just nomads. For the very first year, we were travelling back every sort of 3 weeks, basically to run the brewery. It really just came from the fact that we were always travelling around. We were the nomads of the beer world.
And 2015, it kind of all kicked off. What was the first beer that you produced?
So the very first beer. So we had 3 beers that came to mind, and they were the first 3 beers that we made. The first beer that we actually made was Sideways. The first beer that we thought about was Jet Lag. Yeah. And it's pretty obvious why the name Jet Lag, because we were always on planes. And one of the things that Leonardo spoke about was when he travelled, the smells and the flavours of these different countries. And when you come across from Italy into you usually have a stopover in Asia and then to Australia, it's just this ride with your senses. So the thought of Jet Lag and trying to put some of that experience of not just hop flavours, but flavours that not from where we'd come from, but from where we were going to in Australia. And we're Australian, but having lived over in Italy for 8 years, you kind of look at your home country very differently. I think you appreciate things a little bit differently. And when your business partner is not from your country as well, you look and appreciate things about home. And one of those things that we really appreciated and didn't even know anything about so much was Australian native ingredients, and that was the very first thing that we thought about with Nomad. It was not just about creating different styles that lots of people were drinking in Europe. It was about bringing those styles to Australia, but then actually utilising Australian native ingredients with that. So bringing that European brewing technology and putting it together with our, these really unique ingredients that nobody was using. Nobody had even heard of them.
I guess on the native ingredients, I think when you think of Australia and all that, the ingredients, what kind of Australia has isn't at the forefront of what your thought process is, and definitely underutilized. But what are some of the native ingredients? Like, you said Jet Lag, but what is it?
Yeah, so Jet Lag was our very first one that we utilised finger lime. And back then, so that was brewed first time in 2015, hardly anyone was using finger lime. I'd never heard of it, I've never seen it, and it was just, all this research, and we looked at, different citruses and things. And again, the reason that we did that, and from spending time in Italy and again with our Italian partners, you don't look at beer you look at beer as a food almost. So when you're looking at ingredients, you're not just going, okay, I want that bitterness, I want that. It was more about, okay, what's the balance? What can we put into this? So we did a lot of research on, okay, what's unique here in Australia, and finger limes came up, and we were one of the first to actually use it in a beer, and back then, you didn't see it on restaurant lists or anything. It's now, I think it's 4 times the price of what it was when we first started using it. But that was one of the first, and now, we do a lot of work with researchers as well. So like with our latest supersonic, we use rainforest lime, so we get a lot of experimental little sachets that come into the brewery, and we kind of put them in the beers and see how they're going to work. Some work, some don't. But rainforest lime was an awesome lime. Yeah, right. Again, never been used in a beer or a food. purely experimental, but it worked really, really well. So that's what we're really, really excited about with Nomad, is that, you know, and it works well for us as well. It works well for us in Australia, but, you know, it gives us something different as well to talk about. You know, we export, and, you know, when you're actually saying, okay, well, what's the point of difference? It's like, you got a little bit of Australia in here, you know, and what does everyone love about Australia? We're so bloody unique, aren't we? We've got all these weird things that kill you and bite you and whatever, and, you know, you've always got
these... It's always a tough one where I see some breweries, you know, trying to export to America and stuff like that. I'm like, there's no way the Australian beer is going to be cheaper than the American beer.
Oh, no.
And why would you buy it if it's exactly the same?
Yeah.
One of the most expensive beer countries in the world, even the stuff we produce. So it's always, you've got to be unique to export. You can always sell something once.
Yeah.
But how do you sell it a second and third time?
I mean, you know, part of it is the lifestyle. Oh, wow, Australian beer, you know, we want that little bit of Australian lifestyle. But quite frankly, you put it on the shelf with the price tag that you've got to put it on the shelf with. And it's got to be a good beer. It's got to be something, you know, people have got to get an experience from it. So, yeah.
There's another beer that you do that I think it's probably become one of your more popular ones. It's Freshie.
Freshie, salt and pepper. We love her.
There's a story behind how it came.
Yeah, so this is definitely one of the beers that I'm really proud of as a brewery, because it did exactly what we wanted. It's why we started Nomad. So what we all wanted to do with this brewery is to give people a much more diverse range of beers, so that you don't have to be a hophead to actually like beer. I'm absolutely not. And that was one of the things I discovered. So I discovered when I was overseas that I was drinking a lot of sour beers. And one of the beers that I particularly loved, the style that I loved, was a Goza. Never heard of it before. I was in I think I was in some monastery somewhere at some beer festival and tried the Magic Rock. Or was it Magic Rock? Yeah, the Magic Rock salty kiss, and just went, what is this?
Yeah. And
it was a gooseberry Goza, and I just said, this style is amazing. What is this? It's not a lager. It's not it's kind of salty. It's kind of sour, but bloody hell, it's refreshing. It's so good. I could drink this all day. And so, you know, it was a style that we really liked. And when we were actually constructing the brewery, because we were putting it all together piece by piece, it was a beautiful, one of those classic winter's day in Sydney, but blue skies, absolute blue skies. And the boys went down to the beach, having a bit of a break, and Brooksy was there, and, you know, the salt sprays coming off the beach into his face, and he was just like, oh, this is just awesome. I just wish I could bottle this moment. And he was like, salt, Goza. And make a Goza. And we're like, yeah. Okay, salt, seawater. Let's grab some seawater. So, you know, sure enough, 2 buckets down to the beach, grab some seawater, and they're like, okay, yeah, coriander, yeah, that's okay, that's what we would normally use, but let's use something, you know, uniquely Australian. You know, played around with a few things. Tasmanian pepperberry, awesome, really like that taste. So, yeah, we did the first Freshie salt and pepper, so Freshie because of Freshwater Beach. And did it as a one-off, thought, yeah, you know, nobody can pronounce it, nobody knows what this beer style is, you know, kind of a Gossa, kind of a Gozzy, kind of a, you know.
No one knows what traditional Goza is, because most Gozas are sweet, yeah. Traditional.
Yeah, so, but, you know, sure enough, it became quite popular, and now it's now a core beer, and we actually do a Freshie series where we add different things to it. When we do sort of seasonal ones, we actually did a coffee Goza, an espresso Goza. So, but yeah, look, Freshie definitely is the kind of beer that we're super, super proud of, because it really represents why we got into brewing.
I think that story as well is very uniquely Australian of I'm at the beach, let's just take some free seawater and then use that. Confirm that the beer is now not using seawater though. From,
still seawater, but not from
Freshie Beach.
Yeah, no, that's right. After we started exporting, we had to make sure that everything was ticked and checked and everything. So, yeah.
The challenges in your brewer, though, starting with a Goza as your core line beer, I don't think anyone at the time was doing a core line Goza, which probably made it hard for Nomad in the early years of trying to do
Well, I think
doses and Berliner Weisses, which no one was really doing them here.
Yeah, that's one of the things with Nomad is that when you said, what beers did you start with? We started with what is now an XPA, but we called it a pale ale, the Jet Lag IPA and a Saison. And again, we did those because we love those styles, but the Saison in particular was a fabulous beer, but it was really hard to sell. So many people just don't want a Saison.
I think a lot of people don't even know what a Saison is.
Yeah, and so now, we make one and we call it a farmhouse ale. But again, it's one of our favourite styles, and we're going to persist. We're going to make another Saison this season.
I guess on the Australian beer trends, having the export, so the import business and your own brewery, you're in a unique position, I guess, to see what might be coming.
Yeah.
But how do you then, I guess, translate that into a market that might not be there yet?
Yeah. I think one thing that we have learnt with Nomad is that we probably tried to move people a bit too quickly initially. So one thing that we are doing with Nomad is we will make great go-to beers. And we have that with our South Pacific Dream. We have that with a couple of our core beers, and we're happy to make them. They're well made, great ingredients, great aromas, everything. What we truly love is our sours, and we're really good at it, the kettle sours, and we're seeing that they're becoming on trend, but we're not changing anything because we've been making them for the whole, since day dot, and we're just going to continue to make them. So we're sort of seeing that some of the beer trends are actually almost aligning with our beer portfolio, but also what we're seeing is that, you've got to have something for everyone as well. We're not saying that we make the best IPA in Australia, but we make Jet Lag is a bloody good IPA. So you can walk into our brewery and, and people do, I don't drink beer. Okay.
Try this.
Anyone who walks into our brewery, and they do it a bit, I will say, before you leave here, please try a Freshie Salt and Pepper, and please try a Raspberry Rosy.
Yeah.
So a Berliner Weiss and a Goza. Please do that. And I've had about 2 people who've said, nah, wouldn't drink that. So for us, it's all about not saying, okay, for you to drink a Nomad beer, you have to be a hophead or you have to be a sour. For us, we like to make this great range of beers and make them well.
Yeah. I guess you mentioned previously before about the export and how to change Freshie. I know that Nomad, you export to other countries a fair bit as well.
Yep.
Obviously, having the import business gives you a bit of a understanding of how to do that.
Yeah.
But how do you go, I guess, you've got your identity in Australia with your botanicals. Does that translate to other countries as well?
Yeah, it does a little bit. Definitely. I think, for places like the UK, the Australian lifestyle and, things really translate to being, okay, I want to drink that out of a can and, sort of take that experience on board. Our biggest challenge is it's distance, it's price. It's just getting those massive orders. For us, export's important. It's really important for our brand. It's important for us because we spend a lot of time in these different places of the world, so it's really important. But yeah, we see that that the native ingredient does give it that reason that people want to take the Nomad beers, but ultimately, if it's not arriving in good shape at a good price point, those orders aren't going to keep coming. So
I know for us when we ship from Sydney to Perth, and we get getting a bit less now, but I think people might be cluing up. But people are like, why is shipping so expensive? And it's like, well, it's got to go from Sydney to Perth, and it's about 5,000 kilometres.
Yeah.
And turn around in 5 days or so, and it is very prohibitive to in the shipping just alone.
Yeah.
On the Nomad with the EI business, you've got a fantastic stable of breweries, and it's enabled you to do some absolutely fantastic collaborations. What's been some of the highlights, and I guess what's coming up?
We've had a great run of collaborations in the last year. One in particular that we really loved doing was the sticky handshake that we did with brewery, and that was just it was a really great true collaboration. Because you say, yes, we're going to do this collaboration, and they don't have time to talk to them, and but this one was a real true collaboration. It was great. The brewers were just talking to each other for weeks and weeks and weeks beforehand, just different things, just tweaking. Oh, is that how you do that? Oh, yeah, I'd never thought about that.
Right.
And then when they came over and the actual brew day, it was really it was a really great fun day. But for us, it was, the brewers themselves really got a lot out of it. The breweries, we really worked together, and everything down to the design of the label and everything. And that's why for us collaborations are really, really important. So we've had some really great ones in the past, Lervig and with the super...
Dogfish. We had Sam from Dogfish.
Yeah.
We've had Stone a couple of times.
Oh, Jester King.
Jester
King.
King.
I just opened that last couple of weeks ago, the
That
collaboration that we did with...
the black 500ml bottles.
Yeah, the old.
Yeah. So, but yeah, we got some really exciting collaborations coming up. Johnny's probably knows more about the ones who's coming over.
4 in the next 5 months.
Are you able to divulge what any of them might be?
We're going to do another one with Lervig.
Yep.
He's back over here for a Moondog Festival. So we're going to do a Lervig collab. We're also going to launch a new brand for our collabs as well, which will be coming out soon. And the whole approach being true collabs, not everyone sitting around drinking beer and shaking hands, actually literally getting down to the nuts and bolts of everyone designing it properly and actually showcasing it as a collab, not a here's a Nomad with a label stepped on the side. So there's some exciting stuff over the next 6 months we'll be sharing out shortly, and
Can't wait to see it. But I guess for Nomad itself as a brand, what can we expect in the future?
Yeah, I think we're feeling like we're in a really nice space at the moment. We're seeing that the beers that we love are starting to get a bit more traction. So things like the Berliner Weisses, the sour IPAs, those kind of things that we really love doing. They're getting some good traction. So a lot more of those kind of things, experimenting with ingredients, experimenting with different styles, different yeasts, and so
can't wait to see what comes out.
Yeah.
Looking forward to some of those collaborations and some of the new breweries that might be coming through from around the world. But thank you so much for taking your time out of the day, come over to Beer Cartel, have a chat to me. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to both of you. I can't wait to see some of the new beers, sort of Nomad and from EI, and thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Experience at Beverages and Nomad have definitely played a huge part in the rise and growth of the Australian craft beer scene, and I personally can't wait to see where they go in the future. Once again, thank you so much to both Johnny and Kerri, and if you have any questions, please let us know at our Facebook group, Beer Cartel's Craft Beer Collective. If you'd like to continue to stay up to date with the latest from the craft beer industry, please subscribe at either iTunes Podcast, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. That's it for today. I'll see you next time.